In 1942, the British government had a carrot problem. They had encouraged so much carrot production that by January of that year, Britain was sitting on a surplus of 100,000 tons of carrots, and nobody wanted them. The Ministry of Food's solution was to invent new foods. Some of them were extraordinary, some of them were catastrophic. All of them disappeared the moment rationing ended. Subscribe. Let us count down. Item 10. Woolton Pie. Before meat returned to British tables, the most famous dish of the entire war was a vegetable pie with no meat, no butter, and no eggs. Woolton Pie was created at the Savoy Hotel in London by head chef François Latry and named after Frederick Marquis, Lord Woolton, who became Minister of Food in 1940. It contained whatever vegetables were available: potatoes, carrots, cauliflower, parsnips, simmered with oats and marmite under a mashed potato crust with no pastry fat required. The Ministry of Food distributed the recipe to every British newspaper and promoted it relentlessly on radio and in cinema. When meat rationing finally ended on July 4, 1954, the British public abandoned Woolton Pie within months. The meat pie industry, led by companies including Walls which had pivoted to food production during the war, had a direct commercial interest in ensuring British families associated the return of prosperity with the return of meat. Your grandmother made Woolton Pie because she had no choice. The food industry made sure her grandchildren never needed to. Item 9. Carrot fudge. Before sugar returned to British shelves, the Ministry of Food had a problem and a solution that arrived simultaneously. Sugar was rationed to 8 ounces per adult per week. Carrots were in 100,000-ton surplus. The ministry's answer was to replace sugar with carrots in every recipe it could think of. Carrot fudge, carrot jam, carrot toffee, carrot pudding, carrot marmalade, and a carrot and swede juice drink it optimistically named Carrolade. The carrot fudge was real. The recipe was officially published. Carrots contain natural sugars, fructose and glucose, and in the absence of refined sugar, they provided genuine sweetness at zero rationing cost. The ministry even commissioned Disney to create a family of carrot cartoon characters, including Dr. Carrot, Carroty George, Clara Carrot, and Pop Carrot, to promote the campaign to British children. When sugar rationing ended in 1953, carrot fudge vanished from British kitchens within a year. The confectionery industry, led by Rowntree's and Cadbury's, had considerably more marketing budget than Dr. Carrot and used every penny of it. Item 8. Dried egg powder. Before fresh eggs returned to British tables, every cake, every omelette, and every scrambled egg in Britain was made from a yellow powder that arrived in small tins stamped with an American flag. Dried egg powder came to Britain from the United States under the Lend-Lease program from June 1942 onwards. Each tin contained the equivalent of 12 eggs, required no refrigeration, and had a shelf life of up to 10 years. The Ministry of Food ran a poster campaign assuring British housewives that dried eggs were real eggs in every way that mattered. Nothing added, nothing but moisture and shell removed. This was technically accurate. In baking, they worked perfectly. As scrambled eggs, they produced what contemporaries universally described as a rubbery yellow pancake. Fresh egg rationing ended in 1953, and dried egg powder disappeared from British kitchens almost immediately. American egg producers who had supplied the Lend-Lease tins pivoted to the growing fresh egg export market. Your grandmother reconstituted eggs from powder every morning for over a decade and never once complained. Item 7. Snoek. In January 1945, the British government imported 11 million tins of a fish called snoek from South Africa and announced it as the solution to Britain's protein shortage. The Ministry of Food called it the saviour of the fish problem. The British public called it something considerably less polite. Snoek was a relative of the mackerel, caught in South Atlantic waters and canned for export. It was oily, it was extremely bony, it had a flavour that nobody could quite place and almost everyone found actively unpleasant. The Ministry of Food, undeterred, issued an official recipe pamphlet featuring snoek piquant, snoek paste and snoek sandwiches. None of these preparations significantly improved the experience. The tins piled up on shop shelves across Britain in quantities that astonished even the civil servants who had ordered them. A tin of Snoek cost 1 shilling and 11 pence. Most remained precisely where they had been placed. The public would queue for 30 minutes outside a fishmonger for a piece of fresh cod. They would not touch Snoek for free. By the time rationing ended, the government was left with millions of unsold tins. The solution was to remove the original labels, apply new ones, and sell the entire remaining stock as cat and dog food. The same fish the ministry had described as the saviour of British protein ended its days feeding pets. Your grandmother's refusal to eat Snoek was not stubbornness, it was accurate judgment. Item 6. Mock cream. Before dairy returned to British tables, your grandmother made a substitute cream from a mixture of margarine, dried milk powder, and sugar beaten together until the fat emulsified into something that looked, from a distance, vaguely similar to whipped cream. The Ministry of Food published the recipe officially. It did not taste like cream. It did not behave like cream in cooking. But it sat on top of a cake, and it was pale, and it was there, and in 1943, that was enough. Express Dairies and United Dairies, which operated the bulk of Britain's milk distribution network under Ministry of Food contracts throughout the war, had a direct financial interest in returning British households to full cream consumption as quickly as possible once rationing permitted. They achieved this through a post-war advertising campaign positioning fresh cream as the symbol of returning normalcy. Mock cream disappeared before the decade ended. Your grandmother never mentioned it again. Item 5. Potato pastry. Before butter and lard returned to British bakers in sufficient quantities, the standard short-crust pastry recipe in every British kitchen used half the usual fat by replacing the missing portion with cold mashed potato. A potato pastry used 2 ounces of fat, where the standard recipe required 4 and produced a crust that was softer, denser, and substantially less satisfying than the original. But that held together and could be eaten without complaint. The Ministry of Food distributed the potato pastry recipe through its kitchen front radio programme broadcast on the BBC every morning after the news. Stork Margarine, manufactured by Unilever, ran a nationwide advertising campaign from 1946 onwards promoting its baking margarine as the modern alternative to traditional lard pastry making. A campaign that never mentioned potato pastry because Unilever had nothing to sell you if you used potatoes. Your grandmother's potato pastry recipe disappeared from her handwritten cookbook sometime in the early 1950s. Unilever's baking margarine is still on every supermarket shelf today. Item 4. Bread and scrape. Before abundance made food waste socially invisible, the most common meal in a working class British household was bread and scrape, a slice of the national loaf spread with such a thin layer of the week's fat ration that the knife scraped audibly against the bread surface. Not generously spread, scraped. The fat ration for an adult in 1943 was 2 ounces per week of combined butter and margarine. A standard slice of bread requires approximately ½ an ounce of spread to cover it adequately. Your grandmother made 2 ounces last 7 days across a family of 4 by spreading so thinly that the bread showed through. This was not poverty. It was arithmetic. The post-war advertising budgets of Stork Margarine, Blue Band and Utterly Butterly were spent for 4 decades persuading British consumers that generosity with spread was the mark of a caring household. Your grandmother's arithmetic was more nutritionally sound than any of those campaigns and cost nothing to learn. Item 3. Pig Club bacon. Before the supermarket supply chain made meat a year-round commodity available at fixed prices, the most reliable source of bacon in working class, Britain was a pig club. A street or a factory would collectively purchase a piglet, pool their kitchen scraps to feed it throughout the year, and at slaughter divide the meat according to each household's contribution. Half the carcass was surrendered to the Ministry of Food under wartime regulations. The other half was divided, salted, and hung in larders across the street. The Pig Club bacon tasted nothing like commercial bacon because it was fed on kitchen scraps rather than commercial feed, butchered locally and cured in each household's own brine. The commercial bacon industry, dominated by the Danish Bacon Company, which supplied the majority of British bacon imports throughout the post-war period, had no interest in pig clubs surviving the end of rationing. Planning regulations through the 1950s progressively restricted the keeping of pigs in urban areas. The last pig club in industrial Britain was recorded in Sheffield in the early 1960s. Item 2. Carrolade before the carrot surplus of 1942 became embarrassing enough to require drastic action. The Ministry of Food's most creative department produced what its own historian later described as one of the stranger ideas of the entire war. Carrolade was a drink made from the juice of carrots and swede, blended together and served chilled. The ministry promoted it as a vitamin-rich energy drink suitable for children. It contained natural sugars from both vegetables and was genuinely nutritious. It was also, by all contemporary accounts, extremely difficult to drink without significant personal effort. The ministry distributed it at public events and attempted to establish it as a soft drink alternative during a period when rationing made fruit juice unavailable. The British public tried it, noted that it tasted of carrot and swede, and declined further servings. When the carrot surplus was eventually resolved through other means, Carrolade quietly disappeared. Your grandmother tried it once. She did not try it twice. Item 1. The empty plate rule. Before food waste became the British norm, every plate in your grandmother's kitchen was scraped completely clean before it was washed. Not approximately clean, completely clean. The Ministry of Food ran a nationwide campaign under the slogan "Waste Not Want Not," and calculated that if every British household eliminated plate waste entirely, it would free enough food to feed an additional 800,000 people per year. Your grandmother did not need a campaign. She already knew. What was on the plate had been paid for, queued for, rationed, and cooked with whatever she had available. Throwing any part of it away was not an option she considered. The average British household today wastes 4.4 million tons of food annually, according to the Waste and Resources Action Programme. Your grandmother's plate rule wasted nothing and cost nothing to maintain. The entire British food retail industry earns revenue on food that is never eaten. That is not an accident. It is a business model. This week's Scrape Your Plate Clean. Every meal, every person. Tell me in the comments which of these 10 wartime foods your family actually ate, because I promise you somebody in your family tree ate carrot fudge and reconstituted egg powder and Woolton Pie without complaint and fed their family through the hardest decade in British history. That knowledge did not die. It just went quiet. It is time to start listening again.